As Korea lays the foundation for a creative economy, it's asking for support, not just from Koreans here in the country, but from Koreans living overseas as well. This week after 10, we are joined by someone in the latter category, lending support, a Korean scientist from the United States, Professor Lee Hosin. Lee Hosin, a professor of engineering at the University of Iowa. The overseas Korean scientist is an authority in the field of civil engineering in the U.S. He acts as a bridge for scientific and technical cooperation between Korea and the United States. We are joined by Professor Lee Hosin, who has come to Korea to promote the networking of overseas Korean engineers and Korea's creative economy. Professor Lee, thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you.
Now, you are a professor of engineering in the United States at the University of Iowa. Tell us a little bit, first of all, where you are currently living and working, as well as what you are working on.
I've been teaching at the University of Iowa for 13 years, and I have worked on the sort of automating data collection of roadway conditions, because a lot of people sort of walking along the road and try to evaluate how much cracking in the road. And I developed an automated system which you mount a video camera and running in the highway speed and automatically analyze all this amount of cracks and distresses and then determine priorities for repair. That's one area, and that concept is being sort of standardized in ASTM in the United States. And also the software I developed sort of marketed and used by internationally in different countries also. And the second part of the research recently, I've been working on recycling of the asphalt pavements. And because of a lack of resources in aggregates and asphalt productions, so we try to reuse it 100% and put it back in the road. So that will consume much less resources and also very environmental friendly. And also another area that I'm expanding into is the production of asphalt at lower temperature. Currently, asphalt produced at 160 degrees C, and it creates sort of pollution and fumes, and may not be very healthy to the workers around it, and people, it's very hot. So we try to produce asphalt about 120 degrees C and very environment friendly and reduction in greenhouse gases.
So in short, making roads better, more efficient, and safer along the way, right?
Yeah, and less cost and more economical.
And I know outside of the U.S., you're also very active in global cooperation projects as well. Tell us a little bit about those.
Yeah, actually, I created the Center of Excellence at University of Utah when I used to teach before I moved to University of Iowa. So with that, I started working with some sort of international companies, and also I had a sort of professorship at Technical University of Denmark, and so I stayed there in working at the Arctic Center. So I had an opportunity to go to the Greenland, and so I asked a Kumho petrochemical company to provide the polymer, and actually they brought it to the Greenland. And so we built the road in the Greenland, which is still lasting after 5 years, which is pretty good performance in very cold weather. So that's one area that I traveled. I actually built a road. It's working as a civil engineer. One advantage is you can go anywhere in the world, and just the road is everywhere.
Right.
So
everybody has roads.
Yeah.
Right. Sure.
Right.
So you're not in search for work.
Yeah.
Ever, I suppose you could say. You are obviously here in Korea now. During your time here, you've had chances to meet with representatives, people from the Ministry of Trade, Industry, and Energy here in Seoul, as well as Korean engineers. What have you been talking about and doing here during your stay?
Yeah, I think with the new creative economy idea, and I think the Korean ministry interested in working more closely with Korean Americans or overseas Koreans in the world. And I think that's a great idea. And myself actually went to America after college, graduated from college in 1980. So I've been living in the United States for almost over 25 years. But my heart is always in Seoul, Korea. I'm a Korean, ethnic Korean. So we are interested in working with Korean industries and universities to work together and sort of develop new ideas and create new business and ventures.
As part of this creative economy push that's going on right now.
Right. So they are more interested in developing some sort of formal relationship and asking a lot of overseas Koreans actually participating in evaluating research proposals, and we can sort of definitely provide more objective view of the different ideas and proposals. And so I think that's a kind of good efforts that they try to make it more objective and fair in evaluation process, where we can give a good input.
Right. You certainly come from an interesting perspective in that you've been in the United States for so long, but as you mentioned, you are Korean, of course. Korea is also, or often mentioned as being an IAT powerhouse. I wonder, from where you sit in your perspective there, is that a universal perception that it is an IT powerhouse?
Yeah, I mean, of course, mainly because of lots of Americans use Samsung phone, right? That's the main reason that they recognize it as IT powerhouse, unless they come to Korea to realize how fast the internet speed and everything, everywhere, pretty much available, right, in the country. So outside people don't know, they probably didn't visit the Korea, but they use Samsung phone. So and also they watch the Samsung TV or LG. I mean, I shouldn't just mention Samsung. And there's different Korean products and Hyundai cars and so on. And myself have all those things. So we appreciate that's not exactly IT power, but IT is integration with the cars and intelligent houses and things like that. So there's like a growing IT powerhouse in everywhere, in house and cars and so on. So definitely American people recognize that Korea is an IT powerhouse, I believe.
Now, as someone who's looking at the landscape here in Korea currently in terms of science and technology, what things that are going on intrigue you the most right now?
I think that Korea has a great future, and I think Korea is very well recognized as a very hardware and manufacturing industry side. And it's growing now, but it can be substantially more opportunities in the area of software engineering. And actually, my wife and my son is in software engineering, so I'm sort of surrounded with software engineer, and I'm a civil engineer hardware person. But then recently, even in the United States, all the value are added through the software development. Like Microsoft has been doing that for so many years, and Google is grabbing all the resource, the capital in software development. And also the spin-off companies, and that impact is huge, like Facebook and others. Right. So I think Korea and some more efforts should be, made in developing a new software product. Actually, I worked with Samsung SDS America in one of my project. Like I mentioned a little bit about image processing software that capture images of the road surfaces. So we had developed a management system called UniMs. So that's kind of a venture I did. But then the product, it's a very competitive environment, and there are a lot of other softwares out there, so it has to provide the best quality. So that's one area that I think Korea can grow more. And also another area is, we have a environmental friendly technologies being developed, green energies and so on, and that should be continue to be an opportunity. And myself is involved in the recycling of the asphalt pavement, so 100% can be reused. So that's another big area of industry. It's how many roads in the world. So if you can recycle all those materials, and also the production asphalt temperature is also lowering, is good environment. So environmental friendly technologies still have a great opportunity in the worldwide market.
And that's something Korea is certainly moving toward right now.
Yeah.
When you look at this push for a creative economy, what are your thoughts on it?
People sort of argue what the creative economy is, and I believe that's based on the technology development and the value-added economy, right? So instead of a kind of a labor-intensive industry, we are going more intellectual property type of thing. So creative economy requires creative people, and how to create a creative people is the issue. So I believe. And when I look at the educational system in both the United States and Korea, and United States is very open. So job-wise and opportunity-wise, very open, very competitive environment. So I think in Korea, we should devote more efforts in actually training young people and on their own study more. I mean, it's not like a forced education, but it's like on their own. It's kind of interesting. Science, technology, always interesting. And actually, I was visiting in Korea. I spent like 3 days in the hotel room actually writing a paper. And that's the best time I think I spent during my stay, including the time right now. It's a good time. But also writing a paper was very rewarding. So I think we got to give that kind of an impression and role model to the young people that you just sit down and study and come up with a new idea, creative ideas. I think that's very eventually rewarding efforts, but then some people don't see that.
Part of the thing that you're talking about, developing that motivation, getting people motivated
Right.
to get interested in these types of things, that is part of the motivation of the Korean American Scientists and Engineers Association. You were the president of that association before. Tell us a little bit about that and what the association does aim to do.
Right. The KSCA, Korean American Scientists Engineers Association, and was created in 1971. So that's like 42 years ago. I served as the 40th president. So luckily 40 is a good number. So I kind of like that. So we had a good big events and in Utah, Park City, and over 1,000 people attended our annual meeting. And that's kind of trend now. And a new one coming up in New York actually this week. So I'm actually leaving tomorrow to attend that conference. And originally KSCA was created, of course, a society like that will be create professional networks among scientists, engineers, Korean American scientists, engineers. But another objective was to help Korea develop economically by having those American Korean scientists, Korean American scientists, engineers to contribute science and technology development in Korea. So that was very critical need because there was no good educational system in Korea at the time to train those scientists, engineers. So a lot of Korean American scientists, engineers came to Korea to help develop, this economic development. I think that's and lots of people went to school in United States, including myself, and which I didn't come back, but many people came back to made a great contribution. But to make a point, and right now, I believe that the Korean Scientists Engineers Association work closely with Korean institutes also. So we try to develop some cooperative, research collaborations and with the companies and institutes. That's one area. But I guess the bottom line of KSCA is we want to provide resources for Korean American scientists, engineers to achieve the full career potential in the United States. That's our main motivation.
You mentioned 1971 is when KSCA was established. This is a long time ago,
right.
I shall say. What was the motivation at that time? I think you mentioned a little bit, right? To get a little bit of help over here as well.
I think that was big motivation. Actually, Korean government at the time was pushing for that. I mean, they really seeking for that opportunity. So, it was internally, of course, in the United States, people were thinking about it to creating a society. But also, Korean government had a needs for those people. So it was very, I think initially I heard 69 people got together. Now we have over 5,000 members. But there was a big motivation and working with Korea.
And these days, the association is very active in a variety of programs, of course. The Young Generation Technical and Leadership Conference being one. There are scientist conventions as well, I believe. Tell us a little bit about that and how they're contributing to the relationship between the U.S. and here in Korea.
Thank you for that question. Because Young Generation technical leadership conference is called YGTLC. I started that program,
right.
And 8 or 9 years ago, I was a chair of a young generation committee, and I felt that we need a sort of a bridging this second generation Korean Americans. So we have a lot of second generation Korean American scientists, engineers, but they sort of lose their Korean identity. I'm a first generation, so it's hard to lose my Korean identity. It's impossible. But for the ones who are born in this country, don't think about their parents are from Korea, and also they have an ethnic Korean background. So I think that's one motivation that I decided to create a YGTSC. Also, through that program, we've done some venture competitions. So young people who write a venture proposals, and we select the best one and then give a $10,000 award, things like that. So we have done something like that. Also, they maintain the relationship over 10 years. And we have over 5,000 people and young generations. So they actually very actively interacting through the, like Facebook, things like that. We have a website, that sort of thing.
Getting back to what you're doing here this week, I know you're meeting with people from various segments of science and industry here, as well as the government. And I heard you're promoting an R&D social platform next month. Tell us a little bit about that.
Right. That's sort of a discussion we had at the meeting with the Ministry of Trade, Industry, and Energy. And they are very actively seeking the involvement with the Korean American scientists, engineers in evaluating proposals and developing collaborative research projects, and even together we can even ultimately seek out the research funding opportunities from United States, for example, in other countries. That's a possibility. So, but you got to build a relationship. So first, the social platform idea is to develop it's a ministry's idea, and develop database. They want to maintain the database of the overseas Korean scientists, engineers. And they're going to start asking them to invite them to evaluate the proposals they have to evaluate from different universities and institutes. So that's the social platform idea. And then they're going to maintain the social network and also bulletin board. So they maintain the communication. So that's the first step. I think they wanted to finish by end of this month, by the schedule.
And in all this work that you're doing here with scientists and engineers and government officials, I imagine you find it very rewarding to have these collaborative efforts going on the entire time.
Right. It actually, when I first went to after I went to America, and I tried to fit into the American society. So I was very busy with mostly American funding sources, like Department of Transportation and state governments, Center of Excellence, and so on. But after about 10 or 15 years, and I sort of settled and established in university, and I started working with Korea institutes. And like I mentioned, Samsung SDS, I had a project, and actually commercialization. I created an office in Salt Lake City, done that. And Korea Institute of Construction Technology, I have been working with them almost 10 years. And I really enjoy this interaction because it's very, feels good when I help Korean institutes and companies. And not only that, but also that I got the research funding to develop new ideas. And all the software development was done through that. So it was very win-win situation. So I actually visit Korea quite a bit and work together. And recently I created something called Laboratory for Advanced Construction Technology with a funding from KICT. And the idea is we have a lot of advanced technology in construction industry, but they usually stay in Korea. So marketing in United States, and also I believe that lots of Korean American people can be a potential buyer of Korean technology, right? So also we know government people, and we have a good connections in United States. So I'm helping KICT to commercialize their technologies.
And as a Korean scientist, what advice, what suggestions do you have for President Park Geun-hye?
President Park Geun-hye has been very, she visited the United States. Actually, I attended one of her a Creative Leaders Forum. I actually moderated a session in Los Angeles when she was last stop to come to Korea. And she has been already doing that, but I think also this Ministry of Trade and Industry and Energy also doing that with the same direction of creating a better creative economy in Korea. And working with Korean Americans are very critical, I believe. I mean, there is a sporadic sort of interactions. I had a project on my own, but some sort of organized a center approach, so that my idea is like specific suggestion will be creating some sort of resource center, like similar to LACT, which I have just created, and several different universities in the nation. I mean, United States is a big country, so maybe divide into 4 regions, and so create 4 such centers, and then work with the Korean companies. And also by doing that, this center will attract the US companies also, and also US government funding sources too. So it can be very synergistic interaction when you have such a center and some multi-university setting. So that's what I think a very good directions that I like to see, more a organized approach, not just one person working on the one project, but specific resource center, which sort of dedicated for commercializing a Korean technology developed from Korea in the United States. I think that we have a good contribution to make.
And with these ideas, there are some who may ask why you are not here in Korea helping out with these things. Do you have any plans to move here and contribute in your way here?
Yeah, I actually come here often. Good reasons, like research collaborations. And I love to move back to Korea. It's a great country to live and a very dynamic society. I like it. But then the important thing, honestly, these days, where to live is not as important. I mean, we have a KakaoTalk, and also Google also came out with a sort of a communication with a video conferencing and all that. So physically where to live is not as important, and whether you actually believe in sort of a Korea economic development, I mean helping them. So I honestly actually don't care whether I live in Korea or in the United States. But I want to continue to work and put my efforts for the economic development of Korea, and also very competitive country. And I feel very proud of that. So, and if there's a good opportunity and in Korea itself, I will definitely to move back to Korea. But until that time, I have to live in the United States.
Well, we'll certainly be watching wherever you may be. We do appreciate you being on the show and providing your insights today. Professor Lee Hosin, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.